Welcome back to Fresh Outlook. Well, we've told you before that our studios are located in New Jersey, just about 20 miles or 30 kilometers outside New York City. Well, just down the road, there is a little bit of trouble brewing at Rutgers University. It appears some of the faculty and students aren't happy with a commencement speaker. Let's have a look.
Professors and students at Rutgers University have come to a conclusion to protest an administrative decision to ask former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice to be this year's keynote commencement speaker. Last week, Rutgers New Brunswick Faculty Council passed a resolution calling on the university's Board of Governors to rescind its invitation to Rice. The former U.S. Secretary of State is scheduled to receive $35,000 and an honorary doctorate for her speech. The faculty resolution said Rice would not be honored because of her role in the war in Iraq and supported the Bush administration's adoption of waterboarding and other controversial interrogation techniques. On the other hand, some students criticized the university's decision, asking the question whether that the positive aspects of her personal accomplishments really outweigh the destruction of war she contributed during her political creed. For the time being, the Rutgers University administration is standing firm in keeping Rice for her speech.
Dr. Michael Mckoy from Rutgers University joins us now. Dee Dee Benkie and Dr. Mirescu continue our discussions. Nice to see you.
Nice to be here. Always.
All right, so your campus has a little trouble going on here. You got to give us the dish. What's going on over there?
Well, I mean, I think that the report said it very well, that there's a lot of controversy over the invitation of Dr. Rice to come here, and I've had discussion with that with some of my students, some faculty. Actually, one of my students is a leading blogger on this, and he's an Iraq War vet. And so he feels very passionately about this issue, about whether she should have gotten this invitation.
Well, we understand that obviously because of her involvement with the Bush administration with the Iraq War, but isn't she still one of the key political figures and historians in the last several decades? I think that's fair to give her those credits.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone can doubt her historical role. I mean, the first woman of color ever to be Secretary of State, first woman of color ever to be National Security Advisor. So she's certainly an important, played a very important role in American political history, but then that explains why there's strong feelings on both sides. Every important figure is going to have strong feelings on both sides, and feelings about the war are still pretty fresh. I mean, I think this has revealed that people still feel very strongly about the decision to go to the war, how the war played out, and that's expressing itself in the students and faculty at Rutgers are expressing their feelings about that.
Well, I want to get back to you in just a second. Dee Dee, I have a pretty fair idea of what you're going to say about this issue.
I think it's outrageous. I'm furious personally because Dr. Rice, for one, is one of the nicest women ever. I mean, I lived in the same building that she did when I worked for President Bush. I mean, everyone loves Dr. Rice. You know, and she has done so many things in academia. I mean, not only, I mean, get over the war. I mean, these professors are so selfish, and it gives a black eye to the university, and it's embarrassing. And this woman is one of the most accomplished women you'll ever find. Many people want her to run for president. She's a spokesperson for CBS now. It goes on and on and on. And she isn't good enough for Rutgers. They should be ashamed of themselves. And guess what else? Guess what they did? They spent $32,000 on Snooki. If they had Snooki come and speak about partying, I'm thinking that they may be able to have the former Secretary of State come and speak at commencement.
Now, Dr. Mirescu, you are in the academic world as well. What would you feel if St. Peter's University were doing this?
Very good question. I was thinking about exactly that scenario if they came. Well, I mean, I would first hope that any university administration would first be sensitive to the political environment in which they're in. And if this was Alabama or Texas or somewhere, we probably wouldn't even be having this debate, or it would be very limited. But we're talking about the Northeast. There was a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction at the way the Iraq War was handled. As an academic, in fact, I do have some respect for Dr. Rice. She's a political scientist. She's trained in Sovietology. From what I understand, not only is a very accomplished classical pianist, but speaks Russian, a very, very accomplished woman, no doubt. However, it's kind of sad that her role as the first woman of color, the first female Secretary of State, that is really being overshadowed by the Iraq War, but that it's also a suggestion of really how deep the wounds of the Iraq War still are.
Sorry about their luck. I mean, that's so selfish for them to do that. I'm sorry, we didn't agree with the Iraq War. Well, guess what? That was President Bush's policy. She was doing her job. She did it well. I mean, and the university had already asked her. That's the worst thing. Why don't you respect the people that already asked her, and then they want to sign a petition?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the New Jersey lawmakers are even speaking out about this, calling it an embarrassment for the state. Let's go back to you, Dr. Mckoy, and just tell us what the mood is. What's the percentage on? I know you haven't talked to everybody, but what's the percentage with the students and the faculty? Are more people in favor of not having her?
I mean, the general sense I get, it'd be hard to break down to percentages. The general sense I get is there's already. Rutgers is already going through different transitions under a new administration, and so there's already, how do I say this, passionate feelings on both sides, and so this was just sort of more fuel to the fire on issues between administration and students and faculty. So what the exact percentages are difficult, but one thing I would agree with Dee Dee on is, I think once the invitation is made, I think it would be bad to rescind it, because I think we've already it's become so politicized, these invitations. I mean, President Obama got invited to, the president got invited to University of Arizona, and there were issues about that. I'm like, oh, well, should they give him a degree? He's the president of the United States. Whatever you feel about his position, you should respect him as president. Dr. Rice was Secretary of State of the United States. And I worry about the idea that there's certain regions of the country, our political figures can't go. A Republican Secretary of State should be welcome at Rutgers, a Democratic Secretary of State should be welcome at Rutgers. But I would be glad for any student to actively protest policies they don't agree with. I'm not going to discourage a single student from expressing their political views. And I won't discourage professors from expressing their political views.
After they make the invitation,
but calling for an invitation to be revoked, I agree with you. And I don't think anyone really believes is going to happen. But if people want to voice their protest over important political issues, and it's good for academics and students, and I feel like especially students, to express their views.
It became a little bit overboard, in my opinion. I'm going to throw a little bit of my opinion in this, where you had high schoolers even taking to the debate, saying that they wouldn't even attend Rutgers University.
On both sides.
On both sides.
No, there were people saying that if the president revoked or rescinded the invitation, they would not come. So people still feel very passionately.
The president has since said they would not rescind this offer, and that Condoleezza Rice would be at the commencement on May 18th.
And I personally say I agree with that decision. I think once you make the invitation.
I don't agree with the president on anything, but I tell you what, if there was a reception or if there was an event, I would go and I'd be respectful, because he's the president of the United States, and that's what you do. And you're taking away from these kids. I mean, these kids, this is their commencement. It's supposed to be about them. It's not supposed to be some professors that are not happy about the speaker.
Well, it also sets a precedent, as you said, and maybe you said it, Dee Dee. Well, let's just say after President Obama finishes his term, he's asked to speak, or President Bush, and now all of a sudden you can protest and say, well, we're not going to have this person. And I think it kind of sets a precedent where it might not be a good one.
I mean, those are high positions. Look, President of the United States comes with Barack Obama or President Carter, neither one I'm real thrilled with, but I would go and I'd be thrilled about it, because they were the president of the United States of America. Always a big deal, no matter what.
I would agree with Dee Dee. I think Rutgers has made the invitation, and you might not respect the policy of the person, but respect the history of the office. I mean, this is the Secretary of State. Like, to rescind this invitation at this point, one, would not only be a bad decision for the administration, but for me as a political scientist, looking at all these students getting hotly debated about this, getting online, having opinions, researching the war in Iraq, researching Dr. Rice, I think this is a really nice way. Maybe there'll be some more extremes, but at least it's re-injecting vibrant debate about current politics.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And it's for that reason why I don't disagree necessarily. If students want to have a protest of some sort, I don't necessarily disagree with that, because I'm glad to see them politically engaged, but I completely agree. Rescinding the invitation sends a bad signal on many levels. Let Dr. Rice come and let her respond. I hope in some way, maybe not in the speech, I hope in some way she responds to these continued political engagement over an issue that continues to affect a lot of Americans. I hope she will.
And Dr. Mckoy, I'm not putting you on the hot spot here, but where do you fall on a personal level?
Oh, but she's going to put you on the hot spot.
Yeah, I don't want to, but I will. Again, I've said, I don't think the invitation would have been rescinded. Would I have made the invitation? I don't know, because certainly when it comes to the prosecution of the war, the decision for war, I really think was the debate issue, but the prosecution of the war, I think, was so badly mishandled that it does evoke a lot of feelings, because I personally know veterans, well, I know people who didn't come home, and I know people who are suffering the effects of the war. And the way it was so poorly handled, and she as National Security Advisor didn't handle that well, and even people such as Colin Powell and Don Rumsfeld said that she did not handle the cross-departmental relations the way she should have. So whether, I mean, but no one's, okay, it sounds small to say nobody's perfect. We can always criticize people for policies made, but I completely agree she's an important American figure, and that to silence her, to gag her, that robs us of a debate we need to have.
And the first African-American woman in this position. I mean, that's so wonderful. So I think it should be celebrated.
No, and I agree also with the professor, because this is still part of sort of the reconciliation that we're dealing with only a few years after the official end since the drawdown. This will be a topic that, for the next 10, 15 years, this will not be unlike in the 1980s when the U.S. first started to get its ideas of what happened in Vietnam. So I think to silence anyone would really cut off that very necessary therapeutic debate.
We thank you very much for your insights on that. We have much more coming up, including the lightning round and some of the do's and don'ts when trying to lose weight. Don't go away.